Allie.
I'm Renee.
I'm Christina.
I'm Alicia.
And I'm Jen.
And we are
Melanated View.
This is where the thoughts, experiences, and opinions of 5 Black Canadians are shared with you in mind. The goal? To open up the dialogue, challenge the norms, all in a safe environment. Now, speaking of safe, as you'll see, we are all 6 feet apart, we are surrounded by plexiglass, and we have our masks nearby. So let's get into today's topic, which is being Black, perception versus reality. Now, you guys know I don't smile with my teeth, and I've gotten a lot of feedback on that. So the feedback is anywhere from, where did you that, to why do you look so unhappy, to, most of all, why do you look so mad? And, resting bitch face, it knows no race. However, angry and Black is something that we often hear in the same sentence. Is that true for you guys too, or what other stereotypes do you guys hear associated with Black?
Yeah, I'll chime in. My voice sometimes is higher when I'm excited, and that's very much my personality. And I, vividly remember someone in my career say to me, "No one's ever going to take you serious with that voice," because when you think about it in hindsight, they're looking for a certain depiction of what it is as a Black woman. So they're probably looking for me to be maybe more serious, or be, present more boldly or angry, or whatever they had in their mind. But being me with my bubbly or higher pitch or tone in my voice wasn't okay. And with that, no one would ever take me serious. And that's a big statement to really sit and marinate on as we think about some of our previous episodes around being comfortable. That challenges that ability to be comfortable in who you uniquely present as.
Mm-hmm. I've experienced it from the other side that I'm sure many other people have, where it's like you're whitewashed, or just because of not feeding into that other version of a stereotype where, you're angry or you're opinionated, or you don't show your emotions as, not even show your emotions, but you're not as vulnerable with people you don't know, So being whitewashed in the way I speak, or the interests that I have, or, even from the way I dress, the way I handle myself in public is something that I've fought against for most of my life.
I so can relate to what you're saying, because oftentimes if I'm talking to somebody on the phone and they don't know what I look like, when I meet them, they're like, "Oh, I didn't realize that you were Black." Yeah. I'm like, why do you feel so comfortable saying that to me?
The phone voice thing. That's huge. The phone voice thing. Have you guys all gotten Jen's experience?
Oh yeah, Jen and I share that experience for sure.
Yeah, I've had that too. I've worked on the phone, and then you meet someone in person, or you book an appointment, or whatever the case is, and they're like, "Oh, I'm here to see Allie," and I'm like, "Hi," and they're like, "No," and you're like, "No, it's me," right? It's insane. Or I've even had that in the summer as my complexion changes and I get darker, and I've literally dealt with this customer forever. They weren't expecting me for my melanin to pick up, because they were used to seeing this version of me that it was acceptable. And I literally remember saying, "Hi, Sue," and they'd be like, "We're here waiting for Allie," and I'm like, "Sue, it's me." That's the perception versus reality. They expected this one perception. The reality is we get darker sometimes in the summer, right? Like our melanin responds to that beautiful sun. So it's.
Well, in terms of the loudness, I know for myself, when I moved to Canada, that was something I picked up on, and I don't know how, but I did. That one of the expectations is that being Black, one would be loud. So I consciously then became quieter, and that's sort of just who I continue to be. Now, at home, ain't nothing quiet about this voice. But when I'm out, it's kind of what I do. And the other thing too, in terms of people somehow thinking that we're angry, is if I'm in a conversation with another Black person, particularly another Black woman, our hands are going and we're animated and we're passionate about, and I've had people say, "What were you guys arguing about?" And I said, "Oh, when were we arguing?" "Well, remember the other day?" And "Oh, no, there was no argument. We were just really into that conversation, whatever it is." So I think that what we're talking about are stereotypes. And one of the things that I was reading is that a lot of times stereotypes are created as a way to deliberately undermine a particular group of people. Sometimes it comes from the reality of this is something that somebody saw years ago and it's just kind of float across. But often it's like, this is how we're going to make sure we put these particular people down. And as an example of that is, one of the things I was asked when I first came to Canada, which I absolutely didn't understand, was, do you like fried chicken and watermelon? Had no clue what that was. So I thought I better look that up and figure out, well, where is this coming from? And what my research showed is that it comes from the southern United States. And actually what it was, and this goes back to what I was saying about this stereotype being created. There were, black people who would grow watermelons and they would sell them, and they were doing really well. So they were making money. It was an entrepreneurial, it was a business. And so the white community decided to change that up. And so they then turned the story around to make it seem as though it wasn't a good thing that they were doing, and to, and I'll just read this. Watermelon, it used to be, they would then talk about it as being for the unclean and lazy and childlike, to shame the black watermelon merchants. And they'd even have ads that showed them in a demeaning way with the watermelons. So that was then cutting into a business and being successful.
Wow. So it's not just grape drink and things. There's actually a history behind those types of perceptions.
And it's not just limited to food. I think through the Black Lives Matter, everyone thinks we have the same view on it. And I know you and I have had many conversations about this around the differences in view that we can have based off of our experiences. So that's a very big difference in perception versus reality, in that, many allies are coming and saying, I'm sorry for what you're going through, but not everyone is in a point of grief. There's different, experiences in how you're either desensitized or how you're viewing kind of the narrative of what's happening. So I think even that it's not just a food or a trait. I think it could even be around perception versus reality, around just experience.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, there's the perception versus reality when we think about entertainment. So, and when I'm in social settings and we're talking, oftentimes it'll come up that I can sing or I can dance, and it's expected. It's like, oh, of course you can. But then if I say, well, if the conversation shifts and I talk about having a master's degree, oh, you do? Oh my goodness. And it's like, well, why is that a surprise? But the fact that I can sing and dance is not a surprise. And so I think there's this perception that black people, of course you can sing, of course you can dance, of course you can play sports, because that's just expected of us.
Well, I mean, I had a lot of that, and I've talked to you guys about that, how I felt in high school when it came to perception. And for me, I absolutely felt like who I was decided for me, just because of what I look like. And the funny thing is, in reflecting on that, is that it's your formative years, right? You're maybe feeling your first sense of pride in those years. You're maybe feeling your first sense of shame, your first growth moment. And I spent that time essentially not being someone else. I wouldn't say that all the way, but letting others think I was someone else, because it was a little bit easier. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about perception. Let's kind of go into perception versus reality. And I'm curious, do any of you try to augment your perception, and that is the perception of being black? And I ask that question because I definitely do, but I do so in a very subtle way, maybe even a subconscious way. And that is, I can give an example as simple as a jeans day at work. I don't wear jeans to work on a jeans day at all, because I don't want to fit into any perception of, ghetto, AKA poor, black person. And in my mind, I go back to that, thing that our parents have always told us: you have to work that much harder or have to do more just to get the same as other people around you. So I don't have the luxury that some of my other colleagues have of dressing down or wearing those jeans, because I still have something to prove, I guess. Would you guys say that you've done that? I mean, it's really absurd for me to say it out loud. I feel like it's a bit shocking. But do any of you guys have experience with kind of augmenting yourselves?
Definitely do. When my children, if I'm going to go to their school for a parent-teacher meeting or anything, when we were allowed to do that, I definitely would make sure that I was dressed a certain way. I made sure I articulated myself a certain way. because their expectation, and not all of the teachers, but I remember specifically going to the school for my eldest son when he was in grade 5 or 6, and I was having a conversation with the teacher, and she was expecting me to be a certain way, and I knew this because when I was talking to her, I said, I work at this place. And somehow my education came up, and I said, I have a master's degree. And as soon as the other teacher came in the room, she said, oh, did you know that she works here and she has a master's degree? And I'm thinking, why does that matter when we're talking about my son and his education? Like, none of that should matter. But I knew how I presented myself was going to matter.
Sounded almost as though it was surprising, like she almost needed to tell the other teacher.
Yeah.
Like, wow, look at this. Like, oh, you're like it's supposed to be positive, right?
Right.
Almost?
Or
Like I'm the
maybe she was
unicorn.
telling her that in a way that says, flip your switch, because you're dealing with a different mom here, right? So kind of almost preparing the other
Yes.
teacher.
Could be
right?
anything.
Yeah, but I've had situations like that with my kids. I remember when I got a call, and I won't go through the whole story because there's just so much of it, but a call to come to pick him up because he'd been in trouble at school. And I was working in early childhood education at the time, and it was tie-dye day, bright dress, bright clothing day. So I'm in like my brightest shorts, you know, a dye-dye shirt that had every color under the sun, and I get this call. And all the way to the school, you know, similar to what you're saying about the jeans, I'm thinking, I can't walk into the school like this. Like, what is this vice principal going to think of me, right? And that was my whole thinking. And as it turned out, you know, for the rest of the year, it was like I got these phone calls, you know, from him. I want you to know that your son did this, and I want you to know your son, and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, finally, I said to him one day when he called, I said, have you called all the other parents? Because my son was the only child who wasn't white, right? In this group. Have you called all the other parents? No, no, no. I just know that you really care and that you want to know what your son is doing. And I remember thinking, okay, time to be bold here. And I said, I tell you what, when you have called the rest of the parents, like if there's another situation, then I'm happy to hear from you. But in the meanwhile, they care just as much as I do. So if I deserve a call, so do they.
I've had that conversation before, and it's really around, I empower you to own the situation, said teacher. You know what I mean? Because it goes to this other extreme where they're like, again, giving you a report on that daily basis. So I've actually had to say, I empower and I trust in your capability that if it is something that you feel like I need to get involved in, but absolutely.
It's interesting. You're all talking about having to augment parts of yourself in order to work past the perceptions. But I found that for most of my life, I've been patting down a lot of parts of my life, or quieting parts of myself, so as to not feed into like how we started out talking about the angry black woman stereotype. So I can pretty much say that I have not let myself feel anger, like let it sit and deal with it and be in it in a healthy way, until the past couple of years, because I was always scared that if I let myself be angry at someone or a situation or let that bubble to the surface, it would cause me to feed into that stereotype that is so widely portrayed. And I've seen it happen where someone rightfully speaks up for themselves, rightfully gets angry, rightfully, tells someone that they should do better, but it's just completely sidestepped. The whole point is put to the side, and it's just like, well, you could have handled that better. So knowing that that could be an outcome, I've always approached things like, how do I want this person to perceive me and hear my point, even though I'm feeling these things? And it's just really sad.
It's a lot to deal with.
It is, because there's this pressure, and then you wake up one day and you realize that you don't even know who you are when you look in the mirror, because you've been actively working against all of these stereotypes and all of these thoughts that other people have, that you don't even know your own thoughts about things. You don't even know what you feel when someone insults you, or you know what I mean? I don't know. So it's been a huge learning curve to have to sit in that and be like, you know what, maybe I will feed into a stereotype once or twice, but it'll be rightfully so,
Intentional.
Intentional, yeah.
And I think that, stereotypes are something that we need to, sometimes we live it. It's not a stereotype, it's just our behavior in that moment, right? It's how others are looking at it that makes it the stereotype, and then how they paint, others with that. And sometimes people think they're being funny as well, right? I mean, I've experienced that. Like, I remember years ago, being in a situation where somebody came up and said, "Hey, you know, we can go to their house tomorrow, and Aunt Jemima here," pointing to me, "will make us breakfast." And everybody laughed, right? And I was standing there thinking, ouch, like that hurts. That's not funny. And yet, not knowing how to respond in a way that said, I don't find that funny, I find that hurtful. And sometimes when I've been in that situation in other cases, and I say, please don't, you know, you're talking about me, you're talking about my people, and then people say, oh, no. I'm not talking about them. You know, you're different. So you don't fit into that same category. Sort of like you get this special class citizenship or something, which it isn't true. I mean, I am who they are, right? But and I think what that speaks to is if we get to know a person, then we can remove those stereotypes because we realize that they don't fit. And so one way, I guess, of perhaps building some more bridges and breaking down barriers is really to actually get to know the person. And then you realize that, oh no, you know, Ali doesn't fit that stereotype. And because you get to know that that's not part of who you are. Right?
Well, it's interesting in your experience too that, to your point around getting to know someone helps remove those barriers of that perception of that stereotype. It's interesting how in that example they did that for you. They removed that stereotype and they said, okay, I look at Christina as equal, but weren't able to apply it to the general, you know, population or to the general perception of Black people. So it's amazing, and there's no way to perfect it. I think it's through these little moments and through these interactions and through these teachable moments like we create, and by you standing up and saying like, no, that's not funny, and like, you know, that would be an aha for them. And there's those little moments, so it is, you know, a journey of learning. But it's so funny, to your point, like how many times we've, you know, I think we've all probably in different aspects of our lives been in a room where a joke has been told, and we have two choices. We either try to create levity and we awkward laugh, which is a very natural human response. When people are uncomfortable, they have a knee-jerk reaction to laugh, or you use your voice and you stand tall. And in your example, I've had that, where I've said something, and I don't know how yours worked out or how they received what you said when you kind of said that's not funny, but I've had it where everyone was like, what? You know what I mean? And then, you know, full circle, portrayed as the bad guy for saying something. So I don't know how yours shook out at the end, if everyone was receptive.
This is Canada, and this is how we get to know people. We laugh at them.
Yeah.
I was literally told that.
And what you're saying, it makes me sound like, or feel like, I should say, a bit of a hypocrite because, you know, I've dressed up as Aunt Jemima for Halloween, and I've dressed up as Nicki Minaj. Like, I've used my Blackness for Halloween costumes, and, you know, we'll watch comedians make fun of different accents and reference different stereotypes, and we laugh at some things, but we don't. So, I mean, when we think about, you know, when we think about perception versus reality and moving forward, what does that look like for you guys? What's your stay woke moment, so to speak?
For me, it's this. Giving and creating a platform in this helps us to define and set a new standard of stereotype, to debunk, you know, those stigmas or misconceptions that, you know, Black people can have a eloquent and insightful and challenging conversation together and communicate with respect and dignity, like challenging and us creating a new narrative. And really, like at the end of all of our episodes, we ask, you know, our viewers, like respond, communicate, comment. It's because we want to capture your views. This isn't just 5 views. This is the discussion around topics that matter in our community that we really want to leverage a platform and bring light to. So I would encourage everyone to interact with us, but to me, it's this platform. What about you guys?
And it's not even only having the conversation with people outside of our community, it's within our community as well. Because there's things that within our community are said that are hurtful. For example, Renee, I know we've spoken about being called Oreo, right? Black on the outside, white on the inside. And it was Black people that said that to me. And I'm like, well, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
Why do you say that? Well, you speak like this and you act like this. I'm like, So I'm black though, so I mean, I grew up with people that acted like me and spoke like me, so does that mean we're all not black, and what does that mean, right? And it was hurtful. It was extremely hurtful.
Yeah, you don't know where to sit, where to sit with that sort of comment, right?
Yeah.
It definitely does make you question your identity.
It's creating the equality amongst ourselves, like creating the safe space amongst ourselves to be unique, but that, you know, as I shared about the Canadian versus American experience, that American experience, my experience with it, was that there was that inclusion, that I looked across the room and everyone was black, and that grounded us. And my Canadian experience is very different, but we have to challenge ourselves in our own discussions on how we uplift or how we tear each other down based on these stereotypes that have now been weaved into our communities, on how we communicate, or the perceptions of black on black crime. Like, we need to rally cry together and unite together, and again, not accept these narratives and not fall into them, but challenge. Like, to your point, I think you're bang on with that.
And I think we also have to take a historical perspective as well and make some changes in that way as well, and go, okay, it was for those who we're descended from, who were enslaved people, and of course we're not all descendants from that, but there's that history of divide, keep them divided, split the families up, so that people learn to be independent. If you wanted to stay in a position, you had to really fight for it, and now we don't have to do that anymore, and we need to start really, as you say, uplifting. We're here to raise each other up. There's an abundance of everything for us if we were able to work together and work it that way, and break down the stereotypes within as well as outside of the community.
There's something to be said about having transparent conversation, to your point earlier, Ali, right? I mean, there's so many things that we can talk about. There's so many things that we can go that much deeper on, right? This is just the beginning. This is just an opportunity for us to, as we said earlier, open that dialogue, ask those questions that you may have been afraid to ask.
So I think the very real reality in our discussion is, like, these are all, best effort tactics that we want to apply, that we want to deploy in our relationships and challenge those around us. But there's a very real reality, and the reality is we have to live today, and we have to be present and mindful of the consumption and the toxicity that we take in, and the impacts that has on our mental health. Like, it's today and it's now, and we have to protect ourselves.
Definitely, because there's this thing called the RAS filter. It's reticular activation system, and it's at the base of our brains, and basically it filters information into our brains, right? So when we hear these stereotypes and they feed into our beliefs, then our brain gets activated and we start looking for opportunities to fulfill it. It's kind of like when you buy a new car, and then all of a sudden you're going out on the street and everybody's driving that car or that same color car. It's that same type of thing, right?
Yeah.
So when you hear a stereotype, and it's not that there was this big sale on those cars and they're all there, they always were there, but it's just that you're more aware. And our reticular activation system makes us more aware of our beliefs and of the things that we actually believe. And when we have a stereotype fed to us from very young age, we start to fulfill that stereotype. And I think that's why it's perpetuated and it just keeps going on and on and on, because subconsciously we're fulfilling those stereotypes. So we have to be very intentional, what we were talking about before, about debunking those, right, on purpose.
Right, yes. Good point, because we ourselves, I mean, I grew up hearing things being said even with my own family, right, that we just sort of accepted and didn't really think about. And then as an adult, hearing them and saying, whoa, let's really think about what we're saying here.
Absolutely.
Where did this come from, and do we really need to be repeating this stuff? So, yeah, for sure.
So when I'm in therapy with a client and they say things like, oh man, I'm so stupid, or oh man, I'm dumb, I'll say, don't say those things, because when you say that, your brain is going to activate and look for opportunities to prove how stupid or how dumb the things that you're saying. So it's really important that we're very aware of the things that come out of our mouth. Very, very aware, because we will look for opportunities to.
Yes. And I don't think that our brain knows whether it's real or perceived, right?
No,
It just
exactly.
it just scoops it all in.
Yeah.
Augmented reality
Exactly.
for sure. You've taught me that, Jen. Like honestly, I didn't realize the impact of how my body will ingest my own words, and and how I will then react based off those words and the stories and like, you know, behind the scenes, like we have really robust conversations with each other and all those different things that we bring in and we're like, was I doing this? And everyone's like, no. And you're like, but that's the storyline, right? And then it's, augmented that real reality. So that's a help. It's really great to ground that in something, to say it's okay that I'm doing it, but be mindful now that I know that there's this piece happening in my brain that's driving it.
Mm-hmm. It's a self-talk, but then to your point, Christina, it's also the talk around us, the people around us, and what we're hearing as we're growing up in today.
Hashtag normalize self-talk.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and it's not just for Black Canadians, it's really for anyone. You've heard our view, now what's yours? Follow us on @MelanatedView, and we'll see you next time.
Today's topic is all about health. And we're going to talk about health within our community.
I had a situation years ago where I had sort of a mole on my nose, and it felt to me as though it had been there forever. My mother then told me no, somehow it had arrived. So I was at the doctor and I mentioned it to her because my mom had said, I think it's growing a little bit. So she sent me to a dermatologist to have it checked out. And my mom was all over, like, you better ask if it can be cancer, all this stuff. So I mentioned that, and the dermatologist looks at me and says, oh no, your melanin is too dark. People like you don't get skin cancer. And I said, really?
That's news.
And so, yeah, that was it. So then she sent me on my way. And then a couple of years later, my doctor sent me back because she was leaving her practice and wanted to have everything checked again. And sure enough, it had grown. And so the dermatologist said, well, we can cut it off because if it's grown, it's not considered cosmetic surgery, right? So she cut it off and she said not to worry. Ended up, it was basal cell carcinoma. I ended up going to so I've had a nose job, right? And they had to cut it out completely to make sure everything was gone. And when I was seeing the other doctor who was doing that, the surgeon, he said that it is so sad how many people he has to take care of with skin cancer at the later stages with darker skin because somebody has told them that they can't have skin cancer.
That is insane, the fact that you have to advocate for your care. Is it not a fair assumption that I, human, go to doctor, your profession, and receive treatment first time right?